Hey everybody, my name is Matt. I'll be your tour guide today. We're leaving stop number 1. We're heading over to stop number 2, the Michigan Avenue Bridge. Coming up on our left-hand side is the Aon Center. It's the third tallest building in Chicago. When it was originally built, it was the Standard Oil building, and it was actually covered in a marble exterior taken from the same quarry as Michelangelo's statue of David. But years later, about 15 years after it was put on, due to the adhesive they used and the weather we have here in Chicago, chunks of it started falling off, hitting other buildings. So they had to scrape off millions of dollars worth of marble and replace it with millions of dollars worth of granite. Now, they took off that marble, and at first they tried to sell it. No one wanted to buy it. They tried to give it away. No one really wanted to take it. So what they did was they crushed it into very small pieces and turned it into a multi-million-dollar gravel parking lot in northwest Indiana. Coming up on our right-hand side, this building is Aqua. It's designed by a lady named Jean Gang. It's actually the tallest building in North America, designed by a female architect. Take a look at those balconies. They're truncated. It's pretty awesome. You definitely got to take a look at that if you can see it outside the window. Now, if I drove straight ahead, we would actually fall into the Chicago River, so I'm not going to do that. But I wanted to point out the river because that's actually how Chicago got its name. There was actually a point where the Native Americans would come through this way. It was a very marshy land, and the only thing growing were very wild onions, and they smelled horrible to the point where the Indians would say, Chicago, which was a term, sort of like an expletive, like a 7 words you can't say on television sort of thing. And over time, Chicago became Europeanized and slowly became Chicago. So really, instead of the Windy City, we should be called the Odorous Onion. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so windy here. That's why you're called the Windy City. That's actually not true. That's not why we're called the Windy City. The reason we're called the Windy City is actually all the way back to 1892, back to our World's Fair days. We would not shut up about how great Chicago would be for the World's Fair. So, a journalist in New York City wrote an article talking about, to basically the people who were going to decide where the World's Fair was, you got to stop listening to those windy politicians in Chicago. So basically, we took their slander and we turned it into our slogan. When people came to Chicago for the World's Fair of 1893, everything said Chicago, the Windy City. So really, that's where we got that nickname. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Michigan Avenue Bridge. It's now called the DeSable Bridge. It is the oldest double-decker bridge in the world that also opens up in the middle. We're going to be stopping here at stop number 2, right across the way from the Trump Tower. Designed by Adrian Smith, built by Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill. All right. Welcome aboard, everybody that just got on. My name is Matt. We're going to be heading over from stop 2 to stop number 3. Anybody ever seen Batman The Dark Knight? All right, cool. We got a lot of Dark Knight stuff here right in this area. Coming up on the right, you see the Trump Tower again. That's where they filmed the scene with Batman and the Joker, where they were using the sonar at the end of Batman The Dark Knight. Beyond that, it's the IBM building. That is the building where they used for Wayne Enterprises. They actually filmed that before they built the Trump Tower. So if you watch that movie, it's before the Trump Tower was actually put up. Over here on the left-hand side is Hotel 71. All the way on top of this building, that is where Bruce Wayne's penthouse was. Yeah, you can actually go up there. And straight ahead of us, that is the Jewelers Building. That is where Batman used to stand and look over at Gotham City. That building was also ripped in half by Megatron in Transformers 3, Dark of the Moon. Now, coming up on our right-hand side, these 2 corncob-looking towers. This is the Marina City, also known as the Marina Towers. The reason for these buildings is the city got tired of people moving out to the suburbs, so they wanted to bring the suburbs to the city. They put everything you would need right inside. There's room for 120 boats down below, restaurants, grocery stores, movie theaters, all that safe-looking parking, and then places to live up above. Now, as the city got larger and they didn't need everything, the restaurants were now sold off. The movie theater is now the House of Blues. Now, you look at that parking. No one has ever fallen out of that on accident. The only cars that ever fell out of there were on purpose. One was for the movie The Hunter with Steve McQueen, and the other one was for an Allstate ad where they reproduced the scene from The Hunter with Steve McQueen. Now, the weird thing is, after that ad campaign, they actually dangled a car from the West Tower. And if you saw it from the back, it had a sign on the back that said, "You're in good hands with Allstate." But if you saw it from the side, you just thought someone was about to die at Marine City. So you actually had a lot of people calling the police. So they actually had to take it down because it was a nuisance. We've taken a left here on State Street, that great street. Coming up as we re-enter the loop, you're going to see the Chicago Theater. Oh, it's a beautiful theater. It's originally a movie theater, now a venue mostly for comedians and musicians. I was fortunate enough to be there twice. I got to see Regina Spektor a couple years ago, and I also got to see Conan O'Brien back in 2006 when he was here with Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Over here on the right-hand side is ABC Channel 7. Channel 7 is where Oprah got her start here in Chicago, so that's pretty exciting. And right by the Gene Siskel Film Center, named after Gene Siskel, who was the film critic, part of Siskel and Ebert. We are going to be coming up here to our stop number 3, right here at the Block 37, right across the street from Macy's. All right. Welcome aboard, everybody. My name is Matt. We're going to be heading on over to stop number 4. We're right here on State Street, that great street. Everyone knows Michigan Avenue for the shopping here in the city, but what you might not know is many of the same shopping places are right here on State Street, and oftentimes a lot cheaper. So if you want to do some shopping, this is a great place to do it. Coming up on our left-hand side, you'll see Target. Now, that's not that exciting. It is the first big store downtown that's sort of a department store like that, but you'll see it's in the beautiful structure on the outside. That's actually the old Carson Prairie Scott building. They had to leave that ornamentation on the outside because it's so beautiful. I don't know, it's also historic, but it's so pretty. Now, State Street was basically created by a man named Potter Palmer. Potter Palmer was a retail mogul. He's the person that came up with the idea of the money-back guarantee. He's the person that came up with the idea of a bargain basement. He's the person that made it fashionable for women to shop on their own. Now, we're going to take a left-hand turn here, and we're going to go by the Palmer House Hilton. Originally, the Palmer Hotel was on the left-hand side of the street. He built his for his wife, Bertha. Beautiful name for a beautiful lady, who was actually 22 years younger than him. He built it for her because his friends were like, I think she's marrying you for your money, and he approached her about it, and she said, Potter, I would marry you if you're an innkeeper. So as a wedding gift, he built her a hotel. Problem is, this hotel was completed 15 to 13, I don't know for sure, about 13 days before the Great Chicago Fire and burned in the fire. So instead of leaving town, he actually took out the largest personal loan ever at that time, over $1.5 million, to help rebuild Chicago, including building the hotel over here on the right-hand side. This hotel has been open every day since 1893, and it's where the fudge brownie was invented. Delicious. Now, Potter Palmer died in 1904, and he actually left money in his will for Bertha Palmer's next husband. It said in his will, if you're going to marry this woman, you're going to need this money. I think that's pretty funny. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see the Crown Fountains. 2 50-foot columns with LED screens. They've got faces on the inside. Every once in a while, they'll open up their mouth and they'll spit out water. That's, to me, it's supposed to be a modern take on the gargoyle. Now, speaking of art, we're actually heading towards the Art Institute of Chicago. It is more than a museum. It's also a school. Some famous alumni of the Art Institute include L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, Orson Welles, who wrote, starred, and directed in Citizen Kane, David Sedaris, a modern-day humorist who just put out a new book, Hugh Hefner, who created Playboy magazine, and Walt Disney, who created a mouse. Got real famous for it. A lot of great pieces of art inside this building, including Nighthawks, Saturday in the Park with George, and American Gothic. This is going to be our stop right here for stop number 4, the Art Institute of Chicago. All right, guys, welcome aboard. My name is Matt. I'll be taking you on the tour. Our next stop is going to be stop number 5, the Hilton Hotel. Now, we're on Michigan Avenue right now. Michigan Avenue, before the Great Chicago Fire, was Pine Street. And Pine Street was actually lakefront property. Lake Michigan actually came right up here to this street. But after the fire, on October the 8th, 1871, it burned for 3 days, left 100,000 people homeless, killed 300 people, and burned down 18,000 structures. They had to get rid of that debris. So what do? Well, you chose the ecologically friendly thing, and you just bulldoze it all into the lake. So everything you see to our left-hand side has been built on the ruins of old Chicago. Now, coming up here on the right-hand side, these first 2 buildings past Van Buren, I believe, are ugly. They're ugly buildings, but they were put up right after the fire to show that the city was not dead. So even though they're not very attractive, they will be here forever. So when you bring your children to Chicago, and they bring their children to Chicago, and those children bring their adopted robotic daughters, those buildings will still be there. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see Bowman and Spearman, two Native Americans on horseback. Notice they don't have their weapons. That's meant to show the gentle nature of the Native American people. Notice they also don't have their clothes on. That's just kind of creepy. I've never ridden a horse, but I feel as if I did, I would at least wear underwear as a courtesy to the horse. Now we're crossing over Congress Parkway. If you take a right-hand turn, you head out to Hillside, Illinois. It's about a 20-minute drive. There's some cemeteries out there where most of the gangsters from Chicago's Prohibition era are laid, including Al Capone. Now we're coming up on the right-hand side. You're going to see the Columbia College. Probably the most famous alumni of Columbia College, in my opinion, is the host of Wheel of Fortune, Pat Sajak, from the Chicagoland area. He actually attended the same high school, Farragut High School, as NBA All-Star Kevin Garnett. Now, coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see the Hilton Hotel. Notice on the second floor, you're going to see some grates that have S's on them. That originally stood for Stevens. It was the Stevens Hotel. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that retired about 2 years ago, Chief Stevens, his grandpa actually built this hotel. There's actually a bust of the Chief Justice as a kid inside the building. They built it as the world's largest hotel, 3,000 rooms. It was the first hotel to ever have bathrooms in every room. But sadly, they lost the hotel to the U.S. government during World War II. After that, the government used it as barracks, as naval barracks, when they had the training center out at Navy Pier. And then they sold it off to the Hilton family. It was actually the first ever large Hilton hotel. So you can kind of blame this hotel for us even knowing who Paris Hilton is. On top of the building, they have the Conrad Hilton Suite. It's the most expensive place to stay in the city of Chicago. It goes for as much as $10,000 a night. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but you do get some perks: 24-hour maid and butler service, your own private elevator, a helipad, and free HBO. It's pretty fun. We're going to be stopping right here for stop number 5, the Hilton Hotel. All right, guys, now we're going to head on over to stop number 6. Stop number 6 is the museum campus. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see another guy on a horse. This time he does have clothes on. This is General Logan. He was a Civil War general, actually came back to Illinois once the Civil War was over. He ended up becoming a senator from Illinois, and he came up with the idea for something called Declaration Day, which we now know as Memorial Day. So you can thank that guy on a horse for Memorial Day. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see the Agora. It's 106 armless, headless sculptures. It was done by Polish artist Magdalena Anakonowicz. That's how I say it. I'm not the most brilliant person in the world. It could be Anakonowicz. I don't know. I'm not Polish. But notice how all the statues are not facing the same direction. That's meant to show that even though we're all here together on the earth, we can still choose our own path. Notice they also don't have a head or an arm. Because her idea, she saw people being taken away by the Nazis during World War II, so her idea was that the head is where bad ideas come from, and the arms are the things that do the actions of the head. But notice their chest cavity is very large, because she thought inside everyone has a good heart. Now, let's see, there's 106 of them. That means 212 legs. Easily the number one tourist destination for dogs in the city of Chicago. Now, we're going to take a left-hand turn, but if we took a right, we'd be right where the Great Chicago Fire started, in about 1 mile. As I mentioned earlier, October the 8th, 1871, the fire started. The story is that a cow hated the city of Chicago and decided to knock over a lantern. That's not true. That was just printed because the city of Chicago wanted to blame the Irish for the fire. The real story is sort of up in the air. Some people, I watched a documentary on the Discovery Channel. They speculate that a neighbor's dinner party maybe went later than normal and an ember from their fireplace sprung up and hit the barn. Some people think that it might have been meteors from space because there were actually fires in a town called Peshtigo, Wisconsin on the same night that did more damage and actually killed more people. But all totaled, we left 100,000 people homeless, killed 300 people, and burned down 18,000 structures. But we rebuilt, and that's why we're called the Second City. And honestly, I think Chicago would not be as pretty of a city today if we had not had burned down in 1871. We're going to take a right-hand turn here. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see Soldier Field, home of the Chicago Bears. This is where the Bears play from September until usually about a week before the playoffs. Now you'll notice it kind of looks like a giant spaceship has landed inside that building. That's because the Bears wanted a new stadium. The city said no. The Bears threatened to leave. They were going to go to Gary, Indiana and play. The city said, well, one, we own the name. Two, we'll shut down the expressway so your fans can't get to the game. So they compromised. They basically dug out the old Soldier Field and built a new stadium inside of it. Although it is a much better place to see a ballgame, it is much smaller. It only seats around 60,000 people, making it the second smallest stadium in the National Football League. Straight ahead of us is the McCormick Place. That's the largest convention center in the United States. They have the world's largest auto show. They had a candy show earlier. It's where Barack Obama celebrated his second victory as president. And it's where they had the NATO summit, where over 60 of the world's leaders came together and met. All right, now if you've been in this area before 2002, you might remember an airport out here called Meigs Field. Meigs Field was Chicago's third airport. It was a small commuter airport. Mayor Daley, the mayor at the time, didn't like the idea of having an airport this close to downtown Chicago after the attacks in New York on September 11th, 2001. So instead of renegotiating the contract in 2002, he just sent out some bulldozers, and they dug up the runways. With the airport gone, we did get to add some stuff. I go over here on the right-hand side. This is the highest natural point of elevation. It's actually a sled hill, but we call it Mount Chicago right here. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Gold Star Family Memorial. It honors any police officer who died in the line of duty all the way back to when the city of Chicago started in 1833. For every tree planted in this area is for a police officer who has lost their life. There's over 450 trees planted. Now, through the trees, you're going to see a column. That's an old Roman column. It's actually a gift to the city of Chicago. It's the oldest technical structure in the city. It dates back to 2 AD. It was a gift from Italian dictator Mussolini for the World's Fair of 1933. Now, this fountain here on the right-hand side, this is part of the Gold Star Family Memorial. The fountain is supposed to symbolize the tears of the family members who have been left behind. Coming up straight ahead of us, you will see the Shed Aquarium. The Shed Aquarium is named after where my dad keeps his lawnmower. I'm just kidding. It is, I believe it's the second largest indoor aquarium in the United States behind the one in Atlanta, Georgia. They do have the oldest fish in captivity. It's a lungfish. Its name is Old Granddad. So if you head in there today and they're serving the oldest fish sandwich in captivity, you know it's been a sad day at the Shed. Out to our right-hand side is the Adler Planetarium. The Adler Planetarium is the oldest planetarium in the Western Hemisphere. Not ever seen the planet Pluto before then. Of course, it's not a dwarf planet. And we're going to be making our stop right here for the Field Museum. All right, we're going to be heading on over to stop number 7. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Field Museum. Marshall Field built this museum originally down in, didn't really build it, but put it inside the building that we now know as the Museum of Science and Industry. But he left money in his will when he died, about $10 million, and said, if you want this money, you got to move the museum closer to downtown Chicago. So they put this in here around 1918. They have the largest, most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton known to man. It is Sue the dinosaur, discovered by Sue Hendrickson in South Dakota. Although they call it Sue, there is some speculation that it is a male dinosaur. So you could call it a boy named Sue. I used to work at the Field Museum, and the two most popular exhibits there that I realized when I worked there were the McDonald's and the bathrooms. I'm sure that's probably still the case. Luckily, they're right next to each other. We're going to take a right-hand turn here on Lakeshore Drive. Now, it's really cool for me that we're going to drive down Lakeshore Drive because Lakeshore Drive is Highway 41 as it goes through the city of Chicago. That'll take you from Chicago all the way down to New Orleans. And I was actually born in the back seat of a Greyhound bus rolling down Highway 41. They wrote a song about it. It's called Ramblin' Man. You can check it out on the radio. Coming up on our right-hand side, you'll see a metal version of a dinosaur. That's a Brachiosaurus. Originally, the bone version was inside the Field Museum, but when they got sued, they felt greedy, so they made a metal version, and now the bone version's on display at O'Hare Airport. We are coming up on to Lake Michigan, one of the 5 Great Lakes. This is the only one entirely inside the United States. The rest of them do share a border with Canada. It is the deadliest of all the Great Lakes. It's about 300 miles long, 118 miles wide, on average about 300 feet deep. Although at its deepest point, It is nearly 1,000 feet deep. Take a look over there to the left. You'll see the Willis Tower. You might know it as the Sears Tower. If we pick that building up and we put it at the deepest point of Lake Michigan, you would still see the top half of that building. That's how deep the lake is, but also how tall that building is. Coming up on our left-hand side is Hutchinson's Field. This is where the Blackhawks had their acceptance, or it's where they had their rally for winning the Stanley Cup about a month ago. And it's also where Barack Obama celebrated his first victory as president back on November the 4th, 2008. Coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see a railing that's over here by a purple building. That is known as Queen's Landing. That's where Queen Elizabeth II landed her yacht back in the 1950s here in Chicago. She got off the yacht, walked right across Lakeshore Drive over here to the Buckingham Fountain. The Buckingham Fountain is the third largest illuminated fountain in the world. It actually goes 150 feet in the air at the top of every hour. It is illuminated at nighttime. They play music along with it. It's fantastic. It was donated to the city of Chicago by Catherine Buckingham in honor of her brother Clarence Buckingham, who was the first ever curator of the Art Institute. If you ever saw the opening credits to the TV show Married with Children, then you have seen the Buckingham Fountain. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Chicago Yacht Club. They host the longest annual freshwater race in the world. It goes all the way from Chicago to Mackinac Island up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Oddly enough, Al Capone entered that race twice, and Al Capone won that race twice. Excuse me. Coming up on our left-hand side, you'll see some construction over there. They're actually doing some work for the Maggie Daley Park. It's named after the wife of the former Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley, our most recent Mayor Daley. She had a lot to do with Chicago being as beautiful of a city as it is. And she died a little over a year and a half ago with a very long battle with cancer. So they're going to name this part of the park after her. Now, we talked about yacht clubs. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Columbia Yacht Club. The Columbia Yacht Club is a little more exclusive. They have memberships ranging up to $1 million. So if there's anyone on board who has $1 million in a yacht, I'm 33 years old, but I am more than willing to be adopted. More than happy to take part in your family. All right, coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see Navy Pier. We'll be over there in 2 stops. Notice that giant Ferris wheel. That Ferris wheel is about 1/3 the size of the first ever Ferris wheel in the world. It was actually built here for the World's Fair of 1893 down on Chicago's south side. Designed by George Ferris. Each car was the size of a school bus, could hold around 60 people. The entire wheel, when full, held around 2,100 people. It was free to ride for the first 3 months of the fair, and then for the last 3 months of the fair, they charged 50 cents a piece. They ended up making $750,000 off of that Ferris wheel. Sadly, the Ferris wheel is no longer with us. George Ferris died a few years after the World's Fair of tuberculosis. They ended up, they tried to open an amusement park here in Chicago first with it. It didn't really work. Then they moved it down to the World's Fair of 1904 in St. Louis. And after that World's Fair was over, they actually blew it up for scrap metal. Parts of it are still buried down in St. Louis. We're going underneath Wacker Drive right now. You might recognize this area from the Batman Begins and Batman The Dark Knight movie. This is where they filmed most of those underground tunnel scenes. Of course, it was a lot darker then, but it was still pretty cool to be. We're going to take a right-hand turn here on the Columbus Avenue Bridge. Take a look over to the left-hand side. You get a great view of the Wrigley Building and of the Trump Tower. Coming up on the right-hand side is the Sheraton Hotel. That is going to be our next stop. Sheraton Hotel is one of 2 hotels the sitting president can stay in while in Chicago. It's also one of 2 locations of a steakhouse that is named after a football coach here in Chicago. We've got Shula's here, and then over on the north side we've got Dicka's. Coming up on our left-hand side is the NBC Studios. NBC is originally the home to Jenny Jones. It's where Jerry Springer used to be. They currently do Judge Mathis there, and the Steve Harvey Show. So only the best filmed here inside this building. The building itself is designed to look very similar to 30 Rockefeller Center in New York City. This will be our stop right here for number 7, the Sheraton Hotel. All right, welcome aboard. My name is Matt. We're going to take a right-hand turn and head on over to Navy Pier. Over here on the right-hand side, this is Ogden Plaza, named after Chicago's first ever mayor, William Ogden. Notice that the kind of upside down numbers there, it looks like a 12, looks like the 3, it looks like a 6, it looks like a 9, a 9 it looks like a 6. That is in honor of a clock. That doesn't make sense. It's not in honor of a clock, but it's a clock. Originally it had arms, and it would actually tell you what time it was, but those darn skateboard kids, they broke it. They did. We're going to take a right-hand turn here on Illinois. Coming up on our left-hand side is the largest movie theater in the city of Chicago. 21 screens. It's the AMC River East. They've done movie premieres here for such movies as Batman the Dark Knight, Public Enemies, and for some reason, Karate Kid, the one with Jackie Chan. It was not filmed here, but they did the premiere here. Now, we are heading over to Navy Pier. Navy Pier got its original name. Its original name was Municipal Pier number 2. They had planned on building 5 piers out into Lake Michigan. Turns out they built this one, and it wasn't very popular, so they not only scrapped that idea, but they almost tore this one out. But then in the World War II, the Navy needed someplace to train people how to land on aircraft carriers, so they actually did it here at Navy Pier. They brought in barges, and pilots were supposed to land on these barges. Some were great, some were not great. There's over almost 300 planes sitting at the bottom of Lake Michigan from that time period. Both George Bush Sr. and John F. Kennedy trained at Navy Pier during that time. Now it's a tourist attraction. It's actually the 23rd most visited tourist attraction on the earth. That is true. Yes. All kinds of great stuff to do here at Navy Pier. You got all kinds of restaurants, amusement rides, a little bit of shopping, beer garden, trolley tours, bike tours, boat tours, all kinds of great stuff. Over here on the right-hand side is the Chicago History Museum. Everything inside there is hands-on except for the children. That would be inappropriate. We're going to be taking a left-hand turn here on Grand, and we'll be stopping right here for our stop for Navy Pier. Remember, we're coming around about every 15 minutes. All right. All right, guys. Welcome aboard. My name is Matt. We're going to be heading on over to stop number 9. Stop number 9. That is the Magnificent Mile. It's one of our first 3 stops on Michigan Avenue. Over here on the right-hand side, we've got a couple parks. We've got the Milton L. Olive Park. He was a Chicago native who was in Vietnam. He was actually the first African-American to win the Purple Heart. He jumped on a grenade and saved his platoon. He won the Purple Heart posthumously. This park is also known as the Jane Addams Memorial Park. Jane Addams started the Whole House on Chicago's west side. It was a way of helping the Irish grow more accustomed to the United States. And also, secretly, it was a battered women's shelter, the first one ever. And because of that, Jane Addams was the first woman in the world to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Excuse me. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see the only building built on the east side of Lakeshore Drive. It's called the Lake Point Tower. They actually found a loophole in the contract, and they were allowed to build their building. Originally, it was illegal to build a building on the east side of Lakeshore Drive, but technically this isn't land, it's landfill from the fire. That's how they got around it. It is the only building in the city of Chicago to have a revolving restaurant on it. It's all the way on top of the building. It's called City. It is business casual. You have to dress up a little bit. You don't want to show up there in short shorts and a tank top. I found that out the hard way. We're going to be taking a left-hand turn, going underneath Lakeshore Drive. Over here on our right-hand side, you'll see they're building up this building. But originally on this site was a Kraft Foods headquarters, Kraft Foods laboratory. It's where they came up with the idea for boxed macaroni and cheese, and also for Cheese Whiz. Now, if you've not had Cheese Whiz, it's a spreadable cheese in a jar. When they first unveiled Cheese Whiz, it was actually clear, which I think we both can agree is super gross. So when it wasn't selling, they went back to the lab, made it a much more natural, bright orange color. Now it's everybody's favorite cheese. A few things that were invented in Chicago, a little bit more important than Cheese Whiz, the Braille typewriter, the roller skate, pinball machine, and the zipper. That's right, folks, the zipper was invented in Chicago back in 1893. Coming up on our right-hand side, you can see a giant hole in the ground that was originally supposed to be the location of the Chicago Spire. It was going to be the tallest building in the world, 2,000 feet tall, all residential. But after the economic collapse of 2010, I don't think the building itself, or at least the way it was planned, is going to be completed, which is actually sad because the top condo had already been bought by a man, the man that invented the Beanie Baby. Yeah. He was going to turn it into an invitation-only Beanie Baby museum. That makes me sad because I was really excited not to be invited to that Beanie Baby museum. I haven't told that joke in a while. I kind of messed that one up. Hopefully you will still love my tour. Please. Please love me. Coming up on the right-hand side is the Chicago River. It's the only river in the world to ever be reversed. In the late 1800s, people were getting sick of cholera and typhoid, mostly because they were using the river not only for personal waste, but also we were the hog rendering capital of the world, the lumber yard of the world. All that waste was going into the river, flowing into Lake Michigan, getting into our drinking water, and making people sick. In 1880, 10% of the population of Chicago died of a cholera outbreak. So they ended up bringing in the Army Corps of Engineers, and over 16 years, they lowered the bed of the river, also dug a canal 24 miles south that eventually connected the Chicago River to the Mississippi River. And in 1900, they effectively reversed the flow of the Chicago River. Now, Chicago was super excited to have clean water. St. Louis, not so much of having our dirty water. They actually took the city of Chicago to court. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that there's no way to tell whose water is whose, and they actually threw the case out. But St. Louis got the last laugh. They took that dirty water, put it directly in brown bottles, and sent it right back up as Budweiser beer. Now we're going to be crossing over this bridge, the DeSable Bridge, named after the first ever non-indigenous resident of Chicago, John Baptiste Point DeSable. He was part French and part Haitian. He was a fur trader. He actually came to this area, ended up marrying a Potawatomi Indian woman, and his daughter, Elizabeth, was the first ever non-indigenous resident here in Chicago. Now, as we go over the bridge, I want you to take a look over these flags. You'll see an American flag. You'll see a white flag with a symbol in the middle. That's the state of Illinois flag. But I'm more important about talking about the Chicago flag. You're going to see 4 red stars, 2 blue stripes, 3 white stripes. That is the Chicago flag. Each star is for a different thing that happened in the city. 2 tragedies, 2 triumphs. The triumphs were both the World's Fairs of 1893 and 1933. And the tragedies were the Fort Dearborn disaster that happened in 1812. Took place right across the bridge. And, of course, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. The blue stripes are for the waterways, the Chicago River, and Lake Michigan. And the white stripes are a great blues band out of Detroit. But in this case, it's for the north, west, and south sides of Chicago. Because technically, Chicago does not have an east side. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see the Wrigley Building. You might know them originally from their gum, but they actually started out as a soap manufacturer. And they used the gum as a way to entice children to encourage their parents to get Wrigley's soap. But one night, William Wrigley was going home, and he noticed people were actually pouring out the soap just to get the gum. So he thought, it's really dumb of us to make the soap. Why don't we just sell the gum? And they did, and they became very famous for it. We're going to turn into this little cutout and be here at stop number 9. It is our first stop on the Magnificent Mile. The next 2 stops will also be on the Magnificent Mile. All right, guys. Welcome aboard. My name is Matt. We are going to be heading over to stop number 10 at the Water Tower. Over here on the right-hand side is the Tribune Tower. You can take a look at the lowest level. You can see a bunch of rocks that are embedded inside the building. Those are not supposed to be there. Those are from landmarks all around the world. Some of them were gifts. Some of them were stolen by reporters. It's like taking a walk around the globe when you walk around that building. We are coming up on the Intercontinental Hotel here on our right-hand side. Notice that it does have the Michael Jordan Steakhouse. You probably know Michael Jordan for dunking basketballs. What you might not know is he also makes one heck of a ribeye. I am still waiting for Scottie Pippen to somehow get credit for how good the Michael Jordan Steakhouse is. We are now on the Magnificent Mile. This area got its nickname in the 1940s as an ad campaign, and it just stuck. All the best shopping in the world right here on the street. You got Nordstrom's, you got Tiffany's, you got Walgreens, all kinds of great stuff here on this block. You're going to see Eddie Bauer coming up on our left-hand side. Now, Eddie Bauer's not from Chicago, but I used to work in an Eddie Bauer store. And before Eddie Bauer died, they actually had this policy where you could call in well to work. Like, if you just woke up and you felt too good to work, you could call and be like, I got to be honest with you, I feel too good to work. I'm calling in. And they could do it. The day Eddie Bauer died, the policy changed. That was not allowed. Coming up on our left-hand side, you'll see Crate and Barrel. Crate and Barrel started here in Chicago. They actually got their name because a couple took their honeymoon to Europe. They found a whole bunch of stuff they couldn't find here in the United States. They brought it back not only for themselves, but also to sell. But by the time they got a storefront, they couldn't afford shelving, so they used the crates and the barrels that the stuff came on as marketing, and it worked. Harrison Ford actually used to work at Crate and Barrel here in Chicago before he went out to Hollywood. You got the Nike store here on the right-hand side. Take a look through those windows. You'll see those awesome chandeliers made out of basketballs, shoes, and a hoop. It's pretty cool. And the Apple Store, of course, high-end electronics. Not the best fruit, though. Now, I talked about reversing the flow of the river. Before they did that, they actually had a few other ideas, including digging a tunnel down and underneath Lake Michigan, 2 miles out, trying to get fresh drinking water from that area. It didn't work, but part of that project was building the water tower and the pumping station. This was back before the Great Chicago Fire, and it didn't work. Like I said, so probably these buildings would have been torn down. But then when the Great Chicago Fire happened, as all the other buildings were made out of wood, these were made out of limestone. So it turns out that they did not burn. So after the fire was over, people still saw these buildings standing. They were sort of looked at as beacons of hope after the fire. The building on the left-hand side, the actual tower, around these days is just full of an art gallery. And on the right-hand side, we're going to be stopping in front of the pumping station. You've got the Looking Glass Theater that was co-started by David Schwimmer from Friends. You've also got a Chicago Visitors Center. You've got a very small version of the Chicago Public Library and a Hot Tix where you can get cheap discount tickets for any show here in Chicago. This is going to be our stop right here for stop number 10, the Water Tower. All right, guys, welcome aboard. My name is Matt. We're going to be heading over to stop number 11, the Hancock. Coming up on our left-hand side is a hotel. It's such a good hotel. Oh, man. I love this hotel so much. It's the best. I forgot the name of the hotel. I should just read it here, being that I'm giving a tour, but since it's been 35 minutes and I've not pointed out the fact that I'm recording a podcast instead of, I'm basically giving my tour, but I'm also recording a podcast. Can't remember the name of the hotel. All right, we're just going to skip it. Sorry, guys. Coming up on our right-hand side, you'll see the Museum of Contemporary Art. Contemporary art is any art after 1945. A lot of great stuff on display there. I believe it's free on Tuesdays. We're going to take a left-hand turn here. You're going to notice the sign here on the left that says, don't sound the horn. Do you guys see that sign that says, don't sound the horn? Do you see it over there? It's on our left-hand side. Do you see the sign that says, don't sound the horn? Do you see that? First of all, this trolley's got a really cool horn. And secondly, no one tells me what to do. All right, no sign ever tells me what to do as I stop here at this stop sign because I want to. We're going to take a left-hand turn here and head on over by the 4th tallest building in Chicago, the 6th tallest building in the United States. It is known as the Hancock Building. Designed by Bruce Graham and Fosler Kahn, built by Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill. It was built in 1969. Notice the X's on the outside. Those are usually a part of most tall buildings, just usually covered up with the facade. But this one they left on the outside is sort of a nod to architecture. We're actually going by the number 2 tourist destination in the city of Chicago, and it's not the Hancock Building. It's over here on the left-hand side. It is the American Girl Place. If you don't know, that's a doll store. I've only been inside that store once, mostly because I'm a single 33-year-old man without children. If I hung out there, I feel like it would be kind of creepy. But when I was in there, I did see some cool stuff that you could do with your doll. You can get the same outfit as your doll. You can get the same haircut as your doll. You can go to lunch with your doll. You can go through kidney dialysis with your doll. All kinds of cool stuff right inside that building. I did have a friend in town who needed to get a doll for his daughter. And he said when he went in there, he picked out the doll, he swiped his credit card, and the little machine said, "Hey, do you want to continue buying this American Girl doll or buy this pre-owned Honda Accord?" Because it's the same cost. What I'm saying is that the dolls are expensive. As we take a right-hand turn back on Michigan Avenue over on the left-hand side, this is the 4th Presbyterian Church. It is the only building allowed to be rebuilt on Michigan Avenue after the Great Chicago Fire. It is the church they used for the movie My Best Friend's Wedding. So that's exciting if you like that film. You got the Hancock Building here on the right-hand side. You see all the restaurants. You got the Jamba Juice. You got the Cheesecake Factory, all that stuff. It's a multi-purpose building. You've got the restaurants. You've got some shopping. You've got radio stations. You've got people live there. And the observation deck up on the 93rd floor. Now, if you want a little hint, head up to one floor above. Go to the Signature Lounge. You can get for an overpriced drink or soda, you get the same view as you get in the actual lounge, in the actual observatory. I've been told that the entire best view of the city of Chicago is in the ladies' restroom of the Hancock Lounge, but I've not been in there, mostly because, one, I'm not a lady, and two, I don't own a wig. We're going to be stopping right here for our stop for number 11. All right, guys, welcome aboard. It's been a long day, but we're going to get through this. Coming up on our left-hand side is the Westin Hotel. This is where the sports teams stay while they're here in the city of Chicago. Well, that's pretty fun. If you want to get an autograph, this is the place to go. Some teams don't stay there. The St. Louis Cardinals don't stay there because they actually sadly had a player die there a few years back. I want to say Darryl Kyle was his name. I may be wrong on that. And I want to say like the Yankees don't stay there, but that's just because they're the Yankees, and I'm sure they've got a contract with some other hotel or something to that effect. We are coming up to Lakeshore Drive. We're going to see Lake Michigan again. Lake Michigan is technically large enough to be considered an inland sea. It does make up 5% of the world's drinking water. And it is so affiliated with Chicago. I don't know what I'm saying. Sometimes words don't come out right. It gives the city of Chicago 22 miles of coastline. 15 of those miles are beaches, making Chicago the third largest beach city in the United States. It's pretty exciting. We are coming up on the Oak Street Beach here on our right-hand side. This is where the MTV show The Real World had their Real Worlders be lifeguards back in 2001 when they were here in the city of Chicago. Till they realized maybe it's not a bright idea to have drunk 20-year-olds be lifeguards. So then they had them work with children. Coming up on our left-hand side is the Drake Hotel. This is the Hotel of Royalty. This is where Princess Diana stayed the last time she was in Chicago. This is where Queen Elizabeth II stayed when she was here in Chicago. And although she's not royalty, that is where Marilyn Monroe stayed here in Chicago on her honeymoon with Joe DiMaggio. Now, as we cross over Michigan Avenue, we're going to be on Oak Street. This is probably the most exclusive shopping street in the city of Chicago. Very high-end retail. You'll notice, if you're a big fan of high-end retail, you'll notice some of the names of the stores. You got Jimmy Choo's, known for shoes. Juicy Couture, I think they sell sweatpants. I honestly don't know for sure. You'll see Hermès. I always thought it was Hermes, but it's actually Hermès. Vera Wang. Fun fact about Vera Wang, she's Asian. That's fun. And Barney's of New York. And Prada here on the right-hand side. Of course, that's where the devil shops when he's in Chicago. It's a movie. Now, as we cross over Rush Street, take a look to your right-hand side. You'll see Hugo's Frog Bar, and you'll see Gibson's Steakhouse. That's a big nightlife area. Very, very popular area. Gibson's Steakhouse is featured on the TV show The League, if you're a fan of that show. Very funny show about fantasy football. Now, Rush Street goes up at an angle and hits State Street, and then Oak Street comes down and hits it and sort of creates the shape of a triangle. This area is also synonymous with older gentlemen picking up younger ladies, so this area is referred to as the Viagra Triangle. We're going to take a left-hand turn, and we're going to go by the Ogden International School. It's here on our right-hand side. It is a 3-story elementary school named after William Ogden, the first ever mayor of Chicago. It's so large, takes up the entire city block, that they had to put the playground for the school on top of the building. It's pretty scary. We're going through the Gold Coast neighborhood now. The Gold Coast neighborhood got its name after the Great Chicago Fire, when a lot of the city's richer folk decided to move up north by the coast. It's one of the more expensive areas here in the city. Got Pisano's Pizza here on the right-hand side. It was Oprah's favorite pizza place here in Chicago. Now, it's thin crust. It's hard as a person that lives here in Chicago to eat deep dish all the time. Now, when people come to visit, that's about the only time I ever get deep dish pizza. Because if you're eating it all the time, with the amount of cheese that's on those pizzas, you're either constantly or never going to the bathroom. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see Mr. J's Dog and Burger. They've got 3 Chicago originals here. They've got Italian beef. That started over in Little Italy. They've got the gyro. It didn't start in America, but the first American gyro was in Greektown. And you've got the Chicago-style hot dog. Delicious, delicious hot dog. Coming up on Chicago Avenue right now. Coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see the Holy Name Cathedral. That is the home of the Archdiocese of Chicago, Cardinal George. Pope John Paul did a mass there back in 1979 to live again. All right, we're coming into River North. More art galleries per capita in this area than anywhere else in the United States. Coming up on the left-hand side, you're going to see one of the best restaurants, too. This whole area is fabulous for us, some of the best restaurants in the world. You're going to see the best restaurant in the world coming up on our left. They've taken Mexican food, and they've mixed it with the personality of people from Texas. It's called Chili's. Chili's, the best restaurant in Chicago. I kid about that, of course. I do ask tourists not to eat at Chili's unless you've got a gift card that expires today, or your grandpa was Tony Chili, the man who invented Chili's. And then I think it's fine. We're going to take a right-hand turn here on Ontario Street. Coming up on our left is a restaurant called Eggsperience. It's a breakfast place. I went there last summer. It's not too expensive. They didn't have everything I wanted, though. I wanted biscuits and gravy. They didn't have it. They should really consider expanding their menu a little bit. But I did see my favorite movie on the TV there. It was E.T. You guys ever seen E.T., the extraterrestrial? Exactly. Coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see Castle Nightclub, formerly known as the Excalibur Nightclub. Should have said Excalibur, I guess, but I didn't. This is the original site of the Chicago Historical Society. On this spot during the Great Chicago Fire, the Historical Society was showing the original Lincoln signed copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that document was destroyed right here in Chicago. We are coming up to our stop. You got a lot of Chicago options here. You got the Hard Rock Cafe, started by a Chicagoan in England. Walgreens started here in Chicago. Portillo's, I joked about Chili's, but Portillo's is literally the best restaurant that's not fancy in the city of Chicago. This McDonald's here, it's a 2-story 50th anniversary McDonald's. It's a little more expensive than most McDonald's in the city, so unless you really need McDonald's, I would suggest not eating at this one. Down the street, you'll see Gino's East. If you want to go with the pizza, Ed DeBevick's if you want people to be rude to you. It's a good stop for food. And you've got the Rainforest Cafe here on our left-hand side if you're looking for some delicious $14 macaroni and cheese. This is going to be our stop right here for stop number 12, I think. Yeah, 12. All right, guys, welcome aboard. We're going to be heading over to stop number 13, the Willis Tower. Coming up on our right-hand side, you can see Sweet Home Blues Chicago. It's a blues club. They do only have female singers there, so if you guys want to hear some sad ladies sing, that's a great idea for you. You can actually, they open up at 8 o'clock every night. Now, you're going to see Potbelly Sandwich Works here on our right-hand side. Potbelly Sandwich Works is a very delicious place. It's a good alternative to a Jimmy John's or a Quiznos. But Quiznos, I like saying Quiznos. But it started here in Chicago up on Lincoln Avenue as one small antique store. The antiques weren't selling, so they started making sandwiches in a Potbelly stove, and they became very popular. They're now all throughout the city of Chicago and in about 8 other states. 9 other states, I believe. Speaking of food, coming up on our left-hand side, you're going to see Zoco, Frontera Grill, and Topolobampo. These are restaurants owned and operated by a man named Rick Bayless. He's a celebrity chef. He's got a show on PBS called Mexico, One Plate at a Time. It's where he goes around Mexico and shows you how to cook authentic Mexican food. Look down the street here, you're going to see Harry Carey's Steakhouse. Harry Carey was a baseball announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals, the Oakland Athletics, the Chicago White Sox, and the Chicago Cubs. Harry Carey loved 2 things, baseball and Budweiser, and he put them together 162 times per year. We're crossing over the Clark Street Bridge. Take a look over here to your left-hand side. You're going to see that building that kind of looks like a giant champagne bottle. That's the that is the Hard Rock Hotel. Right over there. We don't drive by it anymore, but that is the Hard Rock Hotel. Now, over here on our right-hand side, this is the Eastland. This is where one of the worst, I believe the worst disaster, death toll-wise, in the city of Chicago took place. July 24th, 1915, the Western Electric Company rented 3 boats to take 7,000 people out onto the water for a day of fun in the sun. One of these boats was the Eastland. It was already pretty top-heavy, and they tried to put extra people on it. They should not have, because once they loaded it up, people went to one side to wave goodbye. It capsized in 20 feet of water, ended up killing 844 people. It was a company picnic. 21 entire families died that day. It's very sad. There was a man that was supposed to be on that boat. He actually saw the disaster happen because he was running late. His initials are on every Chicago Bears jersey. His name's George Hallis. He went on to form the Chicago Bears and helped form the National Football League. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Merchandise Mart. It's the largest building in the world that you can enter into without security clearance. It's the second largest building in the United States behind the Pentagon. It was built originally by the Marshall Field Group back before the Great Depression for about $30 million. They ended up selling it after the Great Depression because they lost a lot of money to Joseph Kennedy, the father of John F. Kennedy, for $17 million. And the Kennedy family held on to it for about 50 years and sold it for $500 million. Here on the right-hand side, you'll see the Chicago Sun-Times building in their parking lot. That's known as Wolf Point. That's where the city of Chicago actually started, Wolf Point. Coming up on our left-hand side, you'll see this green building. Originally on this spot was the Wigwam Hotel. The Wigwam Hotel was where Abraham Lincoln was nominated Republican candidate for president back in 1860. Now, if you got a camera, you might want to get it out. Coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see this black building. This is where my friend Molly works. We're on Wacker Drive right now. Wacker Drive goes north, south, east, and west through the city of Chicago. If that's not confusing enough, it's also got an upper level, a middle level, and a lower level. The upper level is for commuter traffic. The middle level is for deliveries, trash removal, and filming of the Batman movies. And the lowest level is if they tow your car downtown, they're going to take it to the lowest level of Wacker Drive. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Civic Theater. It's the home of the Lyric Opera of Chicago. It was built by a man named Samuel Insull. It was built for his wife. She wanted to be an opera singer. She was rejected twice in New York City. So he built her an opera house here in Chicago where she sang twice and was asked very nicely not to sing again because she was not very good. Coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see the Mercantile Exchange. Most of the activities of the Merc have been moved over to the Board of Trade, so it's kind of just a beautiful building with nothing inside of it. We call that the Kardashian of buildings. Coming up on our left-hand side is the Deloitte building. If you drive into the parking garage, you actually drive over the lobby of that building where it looks like a illuminated staircase. That's pretty cool. It's actually a modern marvel. I know that because I saw it on the TV show Modern Marvels. We are coming up to what was the tallest building in the world when it was built in 1974, 1,453 feet and 7 inches tall. You know it as the Sears Tower, but it's been the Willis Tower since 2009. It's 110 stories, still the highest inhabitable building. It has the highest floor on 110 floors. Most of the buildings get their height from spires. They actually don't even include the height of the antennas in the height of this building because they were not part of the original project. Take a look to the left. You'll see the atrium. That atrium is designed to look like a giant mailbox in honor of the Sears and Roebuck Company. They put some boxes up top at the observatory. You can actually step out and look down about 12 to 1,300 feet below you. It's called the ledge. It's super cool. They say that the box is so strong that an elephant could step on it and it would not break, although I do not know any elephants that have $18 to pay to get up to the ledge. We're going to stop right here for our stop for Stop 13, the Willis Tower Skydeck. All right, guys. Our next stop is going to be stop number 1, Millennium Park, where it all started. We'll be done after that. If you guys are feeling like you need to get some kicks, that's because we are currently on Route 66. Route 66 went all the way from Chicago to California. It was the first fully paved route. Sadly, the route's not really complete anymore because they had the interstate system. You're going to see the train right here above us. The train, that's the loop. That's the downtown train that actually circles the downtown area and creates what's known as the loop. Various train lines do approach that building. What? They do go downtown. We're going to enter the loop now. We're going to come into the financial district. Coming up on our right-hand side, you're going to see Fifth Third Bank. It's a very popular bank here in the Midwest, although they're considering changing the name. Apparently, it's confusing to some people. They've decided they're going to rename themselves 1 2/3 Bank. They think that name is greater than or equal to any other name. Over here on the left-hand side is the Federal Reserve Bank. They don't print money, but they pass money out. If your money has the number 7 or the letter G on it, that means it was it started here in the city of Chicago. Got the Board of Trade here on our right-hand side. You notice these two statues. They're both of Ceres, the guy that's great in agriculture. There's actually a third statue. It's on top of the building. That one doesn't have a face because the artist was told, hey, your art's going to go on top of what was at the time the world's tallest building. And he's got mad, so he didn't finish it. We're coming up here to Clark Street. As we cross over, take a look to your right-hand side. You're going to see a yellow building. That is a downtown federal prison. That is where we put all the old governors of Illinois right inside that building. I kid, but 3 of the last 6 governors have been indicted and gone to jail. Coming up on our right-hand side is the Monadnock Building. The Monadnock Building was the tallest building in the world when it was built in 1922, is only 16 stories tall. It's actually the tallest load-bearing building in the world. If it was any taller, it would actually crumble in upon itself, making it the tallest one in the world. It does sink because it's so heavy, and they didn't know how to build a tall, heavy building at that time. It does sink. So it sinks about an inch every few years. It's gotten worse since they put that Dunkin' Donuts in across the street. We're going to take a left-hand turn here, and we're going to go by the federal buildings. All these buildings were designed by Mies van der Rohe. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was a German man that left during Nazi occupation, came to Chicago, and taught at the Illinois Institute of Technology. All these buildings look very similar. His idea was to get rid of style and class. Get rid of all that. His buildings were more of a function over a form. I don't know. This has been going on for a while. I'm kind of done with this. We're almost back to the beginning, so keep going, Manuel and Robert and Wesley and my dad and Eric and Kevin maybe and anyone else that's listening to this. We're almost done. You'll see the piece of art over here to the left. This is known as the flamingo. It's done by Alexander Calder, although it doesn't look a thing like a flamingo, but it's still pretty nifty. You might have seen that in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This is actually the parade route we're on right now, Dearborn Street. This is where Ferris got up on a float and sang Danke Shane and Twist and Shout. They filmed that during a real parade. It was a Polish Day parade. And then they came back the following weekend and shot coverage. A lot of public art here in the city of Chicago. If you build a building, you have to give 5% of your budget to public art. Coming up on our left-hand side, you'll see Marc Chagall's The Four Seasons. It is a 5-sided tile mural that shows the 4 seasons we have here on the earth, both physically and spiritually. It is right next to the Chase Tower. The Chase Tower is the tallest building inside the Loop. It is where they record the show Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me for National Public Radio, and it is where Barack Obama met his wife, Michelle Robinson, while they both worked inside that building. We're currently on the south side of Chicago, but as we cross over Madison Street, we're now on the north side of Chicago. Madison is the north-south barrier for the city, just as State Street is the east-west barrier for Chicago. We've got one more piece of public art coming up on our left-hand side. You'll see the Picasso sculpture by Pablo Picasso. The original version is only about 2.5 feet tall and on display at the modern wing of the Art Institute, but they took his design and made it 4 stories tall right here outside of the Daily Plaza, or the Daily Center in Daily Plaza. No one knows for sure what it is. Some people speculate it looks like a aardvark, a dog of some sort. There's some rumors that he said it was his woman. I don't know. It's crazy. We're going to take a right-hand turn here on Washington Avenue. You're going to see Marshall Field and Company building, formerly Marshall Field and Company. It's now known as Macy's. It's been Macy's for about 8 years now. The clocks on the corner, they weigh 2 tons and were put on for 2 reasons. One, Marshall Field didn't like his employees showing up late, so he wanted to make sure they knew what time it was when they got yelled at. And number 2 is because they were put on when people didn't have clocks at their house, so people would actually leave their house to find out what time it is. How nuts is that? We have clocks in everything now. Our shoes have clocks on them. Yet we have no idea. We'd have to leave. Oh, I think it's 1:30. Walk down and be like, oh, I was way off. It's weird. Super weird. Straight ahead of us, that metal thing is the Pritzker Pavilion at Millennium Park, designed by Frank Gehry, Canadian-born architect. Now, as we take a left-hand turn, look to your right through the trees, you'll see the reflection off of Cloud Gate, otherwise known as the Bean. It's a 110-ton sculpture by Agnieszka Kapoor. When it was first unveiled, it did not have a name. So that's why the city of Chicago was like, it kind of looks like a bean. We should call it a bean. Kapoor, not a fan of that. But too bad, because it stuck. Over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the only classic part of Millennium Park. You'll see the Roman columns and that fountain that kind of looks like a giant bidet. Well, we're going to take a right-hand turn here and head on over to Millennium Park. Hope you had a good time on the tour today. If I don't see you, please do me a favor and enjoy the rest of your life. And have a great day. All right, that's what I do for a living. I give that tour. It takes a lot longer because it's a lot of driving and a lot of stopping at each stop. But that's what I do. That's my job. I get paid to do that, amongst other things. But I don't think you could literally take that and do a tour with it. I could probably edit it and put in music and stuff and make it about 2 hours, and you can give you the driving directions, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to. Although it would be fun if I just took this and instead of me giving the tour from now on, I just played it on my iPod. That would actually be pretty cool. It'd be pretty cool. I'm not going to do that, though. I like talking because sometimes I riff and it's really fun. Hope you guys are having a good week. I had a good week. Things are good. Yeah, I think I'm done. I'm well over the amount of time that I normally do. Don't forget to email inrigsforyou@yahoo.com for any questions, concerns, queries, quests. And if I don't see you, please do me a favor. As I said to the people on the fake tour, enjoy the rest of your life.